G'day guys, welcome back to Survival Worldwide right here on Reality Pop, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He's our favourite champion woodchopper, Queensland cattle farmer from the Brawn tribe in Australian Survivor, Brains vs Brawn. It's Gerald Youles. Gerald, how are you?
Good evening, Riley. What a wicked opportunity this is to be able to come on here and have a chat. I've been looking forward to this for a good while now.
And we've been looking forward to it as well because obviously we didn't get to see much of you on the show, unfortunately. We obviously got lots of fun antics with you talking about all the dairy products throughout. But other than that, there weren't too many confessionals. How did you feel about your edit overall? So obviously we didn't get to see you too much, but obviously you were a crucial part of that game, especially in that early Brawn tribe with that big alliance with Flick and Kez and the like.
Yeah, look, my edit going out there, I mean, I can't be upset at the way I was portrayed because I certainly wasn't portrayed in a bad way. But I was, I guess, a little bit disappointed episode after episode. Looking back, I'd sit there and anticipate what was going to happen in the episodes each day and think about all the amazing things that we did and the really exciting stuff that had happened between each episode during those days and the massive moments that had been there and what had made it really exciting in the game. And I'd think to myself, what would be in this episode? And it's got to be, this has got to be in there this episode or whatever. And then every episode would go by and there was nothing more. So it was a little bit disappointing in that way. But I mean, the little tiny snippet there was, it was a good laugh.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of good moments, and you were a massive fan favorite, despite not getting too much time on screen. And certainly, we'll dive into some of those stories that weren't shown on the air later on in this interview. But what was your experience with the show before going on? Were you an applicant or a recruit? And when did you sort of start watching the show? Have you been a super fan for a long time?
So my story actually started by accident. I've been a fan of the show for a long time. Sort of watched it sporadically. I watched a lot more of the Australian one than others, but I've certainly watched a fair bit of US over the years. Not so much South Africa until this last season, but I actually got onto the show. Well, got a foot in the door through a friend from Western Australia who also competes woodchopping, and he had applied for Survivor. He'd been into the final rounds of Big Brother multiple times. And anyway, he got knocked back, and they asked him if he thought of anyone that would fit the bill. And he said, well, there's only one person that I know. And put in my name, and he rang me and said, look, I've gave your name to one of these producers. I hope that's all right. And I sort of sat back and I'm like, I suppose. And not 2 minutes after getting off the phone, I had a phone call from one of the producers, and they wanted to do a Skype interview. And then after an hour and a half long Skype interview the next day, I had to go through the full application process. And I went and I did individual interviews and group interviews and all the fitness tests. And I did the full application online and everything as well. And so it's a sort of a combination of both, I guess. I've recruited as well as applied. I didn't get any free passes and didn't get to skip out on anything that anyone else that applied did, but I guess I had a little bit of a foot in the door to start with, because applying for the show wasn't something that was really at the front of my mind. To start with, it's one of those things that I'd always looked at and thought, nah, why would I apply? I'm never going to get on. Not going to bother. I've got too much other stuff going on to consider wasting my time with something that I'm never going to get on. And when the opportunity arose, I was dumbfounded. I was sat back in my seat that, hell, I've actually got a chance of actually getting onto this. Like, I've watched this for so many years, and this is actually happening. And I just took it and ran with every opportunity that was handed to me from then on. And I do not regret it for a second.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're glad it happened as well. It all obviously came together by chance, which is great to hear, and it's always fun hearing those fun casting stories. I also heard that you had a competition which you basically put on hold to compete in Australian Survivor. What was that like? You know, putting on hold your wood chopping championship there and going straight into the game.
Yeah, look, it was certainly a whirlwind because I was actually well, not officially cast, but my application and stuff had happened in 2020. At the start of 2020, I've done all my application and group and individual interviews and made it to the last rounds of casting then. I hadn't been confirmed as such for the show, but I knew I'd made it to the higher ranks of casting. And then everything got canned, of course, because of COVID, and it was just put on hold with no communication at all as to what had happened. It was just gone. And so 12 months later, I had gone back to normal life, competing, training, because we were leading into the World Championships at Sydney Royal Easter Show and a few shows happening again, competitions, wood chopping wise. And I'd been training for them and done a few trips around Australia in the meantime. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I get this email saying, am I still interested? And of course, I replied straight away saying yes. And I had to go and redo my medical and fitness stuff. I went and did that. That was 2 or 3 days. And then I had to go back to the doctor a couple of times to get some results. And then about a week later, it was confirmed I was going on, which was only 4.5 weeks or 5 weeks before the show was due to air. And I had to organise 2 shows that I run, 2 competitions that were going to be on while I was in Survivor, as well as I was training for Sydney Royal Easter Show for the World Championships, which were the 2 weeks right before I was supposed to leave to go to Survivor. And I actually went and competed at the World Championships down in Sydney, came home, and I was only home for 2 days and then went to Survivor. So it was just an absolute whirlwind. There was stuff happening everywhere, and I was trying to organise shows and blocks and stuff for people and trying to delegate jobs for while I was away. And it was just an absolute nightmare.
So I suppose in that sense, you didn't have much time to prepare for the show. How much did you go in terms of actually preparing? Did you put in any weight or lose any weight before the show? Did you think about strategy a lot going in, or was it really just that quick that you didn't get too much time to strategize or prepare that much?
Yeah, look, the training that I got to do was certainly not what I would have liked, like with the really short notice that I had. And as I said, I'd sort of basically forgot about Survivor. It was just gone. We hadn't had anything. I had any contact at all for 12 months. And I'd gone back to training for wood chopping. So I was relatively wood chop fit. Again, our season for wood chopping had been really short as well. Only 3 months leading up to Sydney since the first competition till Sydney. The first competition we had since COVID got shut down was in January. And this was during March. So not long at all to train for that. And then we got word of Survivor, and it was only 5 weeks before Sydney. So I'd done some woodchop training, but no real Survivor training or extended cardio or anything. And I thought about it for a few days, and I thought, well, you know, I'm going to lose a lot of weight there. I think the best thing I can do, because in 4 weeks I couldn't do a lot to my cardio, really. I was certainly waiting for Sydney and stuff and trying to do a bit more there. But I thought the best thing I can probably do would be to try and put on some weight before I go, because if I go and lose weight from where I would normally sit at, the likelihood is, and it was proved to me by other contestants out there, that if you lose weight from where you would normally comfortably sit, you start losing energy, and when your body starts eating its own muscle mass and stuff, and those guys got really lethargic, and you could see their muscles wasting away by the day. Whereas I'd sort of put on nearly 6 kilos before I went. From where I normally sit, I was actually nearly the heaviest I'd ever been. But I lost a lot of weight when I was there, of course. But I felt $1 million at the end of Survivor Day 33 when I got voted out. I felt awesome. I felt really good, and I think there were certainly pros and cons to both sides of it, as we know, in them endurance challenges and they're weight-based. I certainly didn't have the upper hand by putting on weight before I went, but it's a catch-22. Hey, I felt really good, and my mind was working really good, and that is half the battle as well. So you've got to take one with the other and work out what you think you can gain the most out of.
Yeah, and of course, the season started off with a bang for you. I mean, straight away, that first challenge had a wood chop component, and you absolutely steamed through that, absolutely embarrassing the brains there. How did you adjust to the Brawn tribe early on? Because obviously you don't have that bodybuilding background like, Simon, Kez, and the likes. How did you adjust to the tribe? Did you feel on the outs a little bit at the beginning, or was it really kumbaya, the whole tribe?
Yeah, look, it was certainly confronting walking into that first challenge. And the wood chopping being there, because as we know, my strategy going in was never to be right at the front. I wanted to sit in the middle right from the get-go. I've watched enough Survivor to know that that's where you want to be. And I sat there basically the whole game, but it was really tough in that first challenge to walk in and see that there. And there was almost this feeling of dread where I'm like, I literally have to step up right here, right now, first challenge in front of everyone that I don't know, and put myself on a chopping block, pun intended, straight up, which, it really was a tough point. And it was kind of funny going into that first challenge. We're there and we walked in, and Simon was sort of nearly delegating jobs straight up as soon as we walked into that first challenge, as soon as we'd met for that first challenge. And there was this moment where, because I hadn't decided, I hadn't said anything for about 10 seconds or 15 seconds into our little bit of strat talk at the start, and Simon's delegating his jobs, and there was this little voice in the back of my head saying, should I just let them do it and just sit back and just say something when we get back to camp and let everyone else try and do this and not do it? But, I guess the want to pick up an axe got the better of me, and of course you see me up there cutting that piece of dry hoop pine. But it was a really awkward position to be in, but it kind of worked in my favour in some ways. In Brawn Tribe, I think it gave everyone almost not so much a sense of respect, but a sense of that everyone is there for a reason. I think if I didn't do it, or there hadn't been that, I would have probably been seen more on the outer than some of the other guys, because I'm not the stereotypical ripped bodybuilder. I'm a lot bigger stature than them guys, even though I'm just as strong, or probably stronger than some of them. I'm not that look, which almost all of the other guys were. And I think that sort of helped me in that context, that, look, this one guy that isn't the one that looks like us, that isn't ripped, he stepped out here and absolutely blitzed this first challenge. And I think that sort of really got me in on a level pegging with everyone else, that, hey, look, even the guy that doesn't look like us is really Brawn strong.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously, you mentioned there Simon really calling the shots from before the game even started there. You were obviously working against Simon for a lot of that pre-swap time. You identified he had an idol. Did he sort of drift away from the rest of the tribes? We saw that group of Simon, Emmett, and Gavin were a little bit very, very, very close. Did he drift away from the tribe, and was your alliance really working against him to try and usurp the alpha role there?
Yeah, look, it was a really funny vibe after a little bit. Simon, again, I had this little spiel on my Instagram today, where I actually did a few story posts about the vibe that was there around Brawn. And Simon's personality in the game, it really grated on some of the people that were there. And I get along well with anyone and everyone, and that's just me. I tend to pride myself on being a people person and being able to connect with people and talk to people. That's what I do in my normal everyday life, being a rural ambassador and stuff as well. So I think I've got a really good social game, and I really played on that hard during the game. But Simon was quite the opposite. He thought that he was really good with his social game, but everything he said really grated on a majority of the tribe a lot of the time, and that created this really, really big division in Brawn, where right through the game and until Simon was out, and I spoke about exactly this today. I think that the best thing that could have happened for Brawn to get rid of that divide and move forward as a tribe was Simon going home. Not because Simon's a bad player, because of that division. And that division was so strong that no matter what combination of people getting eliminated you looked at, there had to be at least 2 or 3 people go home to close that gap unless it was Simon. And I think that was evident that you couldn't have even got rid of Chelsea or Danny by themselves, because they would have stuck with Simon. Danny, not necessarily because she wanted to work with Simon, but as we've seen, because she wanted to get rid of Simon, and she wasn't going to let that opportunity slide between her fingers. Chelsea, because she didn't want to be seen to be going against her alliance. That was her gameplay, was that she was playing exceptionally strong to her alliance and being true Brawn strong. That was what her game strategy was moving forward. And then the guys on my alliance who weren't going to work with Simon because their game strategy was, Kez in particular, to stay strong to their alliance and not to go somewhere where they thought that their allegiances wouldn't be safe. And Flick and myself, being really, really close allies from the start, that we were trying to bridge that gap and get rid of that divide and stay strong as a tribe and strong as an alliance to make that happen. And we tried to make that happen right from the get-go. And as you see, we were working towards that the whole time. That if you look at the all the tribals, me and Flick actually voted the same at every single tribal council we went to. We did not vote separately once, because we were really set in those lines of trying to bring the tribe back together and trying to make it happen. There was a few really telling points in that whole situation throughout the game that created a massive rift, and then it just got more and more lopsided as the game went.
Yeah, of course, a big loss early on. You guys went to 3 straight tribal councils, and one of your alliance members in Benny Birdo, he went home quite early on there. Do you think, had you guys continued to go to tribal council after that, do you think that would have made a schism more apparent and Simon's group may have been able to get that power bringing over someone like Janie? How big of a loss was Birdo to your alliance?
Look, I said, so let's walk through that tribal. Before that tribal, if we go back to the one prior, was when Gavin went home. Yeah. And Gavin going home was my suggestion that we should vote for Gavin. We've been talking about voting Simon and talking about voting Emmett 2 days prior when Janelle went home. From then on, we even wanted to try and vote one of the big 3 when Janelle went home, but we weren't game to. So early in the game, we didn't know where allegiances lied. We weren't really game to have a crack then. So moving on to the Gavin vote, after talking for 2 days about voting Emmett or Simon, and it being common knowledge that that's who we were talking about, I threw out that we should vote for Gavin because Gavin was the only person we hadn't talked about. And the fact that we've been talking about the other 2 major players in Emmett and Simon gave them the opportunity that if they had found an idol, which we didn't know if they had or hadn't at this point, and them being common knowledge, they would play it because they knew that they were going to be in trouble. because both of the names have been thrown around for 2 solid days.
Yeah.
So that's why the Gavin vote happened the way it did, and there was so much silence around it, because when I said it, I said, look, we need to vote Gavin because he's the only name that hasn't been mentioned, and it needs to stay dead silent. They cannot know. No one can know anything. This has got to be, we've said it once, we've said it now, that's the end of it. We just go to tribal and vote. End of story. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why there was no chatter around Gavin going home. There's that, because it was a decision that was made about 3 or 4 hours before tribal, and then it was never spoken about ever again. We went to tribal and voted out Gavin. So then leading into the Benny vote, when no idols had been played, we voted out Gavin, came back to camp, and we tailed Emmett and Simon, Flick in particular. I made her follow Simon like a bad smell for the next 2 days. Followed him to make sure that there was no more idols found. We kept an eye out like absolute hawks to make sure that there was no idols, leading into that 3rd tribal that we went to. And we'd gone in there with the decision made up that we were going to vote Simon. That's who we're going to get rid of, the other one of the big 3. That would leave Emmett sitting out in the open, and that would leave the rest of their alliance, either Chelsea, Danny, or Emmett, open for the pickings, and we could align with whoever we wanted to. And, of course, we went to that tribal, and then Danny decided to flip, because Danny's game plan going in was not so much one of strategy, it was one of, yep, I want to cause chaos. That's it. That's all I want to do, is make things spicy and have fun. And that was so hard to work with, because whenever things started to get a little bit comfortable, like we had the numbers there comfortably to be able to vote Simon, we knew there was no idols on their side, and Dave's like, it's too comfortable, time to flip. That was literally the whole logic behind it. That's what the logic was. And we went into that tribal then, and as we know, myself, Shannon, Kez, and Flick all voted the same way with Benny, so that made 5. But when Danny flipped, that made 5 on their side still, of course. And with that tied vote, we then stood up and actually had a discussion behind everyone, myself, Shannon, Kez, Flick, and Danny. And I said, look, we've got to stay strong here. Danny, you need to vote here, because I said, if we don't, there is going to be hell to pay later. We need to stay strong and use this opportunity that's presented to us right here, right now, to make this happen. And I knew in that moment that if something else did happen, and I said it to Shannon then and straight after tribal, that a vote against Benny is shooting herself in the foot. Even though a lot of the girls didn't really want to work with Benny and wanted to vote him out, I don't think that was the point in the game to do that, because he was voting with us. He'd voted with us every time he was an alliance member. So Shannon and Kez both flipped, because neither of them were game to take it to rocks. I said to them that even if we don't, like, even if we draw again, even if Danny doesn't come back and vote with us, if it's an even vote and a split vote, we are better off taking it to rocks and taking a 50-50 gamble that one of their alliance goes home, whether it be Emmett, Danny, Chelsea, then we are taking a 100% chance of getting rid of one of our own alliance members in Benny. It's just simple numbers. And, of course, they flipped. Benny went home, and we went back to camp, and I said to Shannon that, look, I said when we were there, and I'll say it again, we just shot ourselves in the foot, because me and Flick stayed strong. We still voted for Simon, of course, but with the other 2 voting the other way and Danny not swinging back, that's still Benny's fate. And it was literally the next morning at, who knows, like 7 o'clock in the morning, when Simon found that next idol, that first idol. And I went up to Flick and Kez up at the well, and I just said, "You're not going to guess who just found idol." And Flick goes, "Simon." And I just shook my head, and I'm like, "I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so." And yeah, that's where that went. And it's sort of that little bit of background that we don't see that was really telling in those situations. There's a lot more thought in what was happening there and a lot more behind the scenes than what first appeared on our screen. That the background for the Benny vote actually started 3 votes before. It started at Janelle, and in the different way that it went through, and the sort of 6 days of planning that went into trying to get rid of, to try to vote out Simon that night, to reunite the tribe and make it so there was no big division and numbers could be swapped back and forward if need be. But of course, that didn't come to fruition, and that's only speculation nowadays.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioning Simon finding the idol there is the perfect segue to my next question, of course. Simon found the idol, as you saw it and went straight back to Flick and Kez. And you really dodged a bullet there because you didn't go to tribal council really until the tribe swapped there. Did you have any sense at any stage in the game that Simon may have had 2 idols? And when did you sort of find out about that? Did you find out about that at the merge, I assume?
So I had no inkling whatsoever that Simon had a second idol. Not that it really mattered to me in that moment. Of course, it was lucky that we didn't go to tribal again, because we sort of had our hands tied behind our back a little bit from that point, our alliance, with it being even numbers. But when we had tribe swap, I went over to Brain's tribe and spent the majority of the time making sure that all of the Brains tribe knew that Simon was enemy number 1 and that he had an idol. And no matter what, if we had any chance that came up at any point, no matter whether it was a joint tribal or it was when we got to merge or any of the above, that Simon had to be the first person to go. And that was to get rid of that division, to give Brawn tribe any chance of moving forward. Because if that division was still there when we got to merge, it was game over. Right then and there for all of us. Because that would have put the whole lot of us in the minority of 3 or 4 people on each side and 5 or 6 on Brains, and end of story. So going forward then, the first moment that I found out that Simon had a second idol was actually when George and Cara came back from that tribal where they went and sat in and Simon went home, and they walked back into camp, and myself, Emmett, Kez, and Laura was sitting around the fire, and they walked in very late at night and said, "Guess what? Simon's going home," and we sort of all cheered. And then they said, "With 2 idols," and there was just an eruption of jubilation around the camp, and there was lots of kumbayaing and dancing around the fire for many, many hours.
So you said there that you were really trying to hammer home the point that Simon was going to be our biggest threat going forward in the game. Did Emmett actually buy into that at that point, or was he still really close with Simon headed into the merge? How do you think that would have shaken out had Simon played one of his idols and had gone into the merge, with an extra idol in his pocket?
So, again, I hate speaking for other people on other people's thoughts, but from everything that I know, and I mean, I spent a lot of days with Emmett. Emmett's thoughts on the matter were that it was a sinking ship. That we actually said this in the tribal where Benny went home. It was the sinking SS Simo, and Emmett said it himself that he was trying to jump from the sinking SS Simo. It was going down the ball of flames, but Emmett didn't have any options. We didn't want him on our alliance at that point in Brawn tribe because we had the numbers with the Adima. We didn't want to take that gamble. But once we got to Brains, all bets were off. And as I said, I was trying to bridge that division. As soon as that divide was gone, me, Emmett, and Kez were tight, along with Dane, of course, until Daney had his premature exodus. But yeah, it was a feeling that Emmett wanted Simon gone as well, because Emmett could see the greater good for Brawn. That he didn't. Emmett's a smart guy as well, and we sat there. We had many conversations about this. That it was the only option for us moving forward, was that we all had to try and stick strong and make those smart decisions. And getting rid of Simon was certainly the best way to do that moving forward for all of us.
Jumping back a little bit to when really the post swap after Kara came over to the Brawns, obviously you only had a couple of days there together before she swapped over to the Brains tribe. How close of a relationship did you build there? And were you guys pretty close at that stage of the game headed into the tribe swap? Did that help a little bit to maneuver herself over to your alliance?
Yeah, look, so when Kara came to Brawn Tribe, it was a real wake-up call that everything was going to start happening at a great rate of knots game. And we did form a relationship. We weren't quite sure how strong it was yet until we went over to Brains, of course. But it was a really funny atmosphere around camp, that sort of unknowing with someone that hadn't proven their loyalty or voted in any particular way at that point, coming in and then trying to form an alliance with them when you have no idea about this person, when you actually know everyone else. It's funny that everyone was like that on day one, but once you form that bond and know people to an extent, it's really, really hard to find that common ground with someone that has no idea about that. And that's what we call tribe division in Survivor, of course. And we see that every season with tribe swap and then at merge. And those old tribal lines are followed because of exactly that feeling, that it's that common ground, even though it's a completely arbitrary line that's drawn in the sand that means absolutely nothing. We all what's comfortable and what we know.
And Kara's loyalty in that alliance was tested a little bit at that first post-swap vote when Danny went out. And we did speak to Kara, and she mentioned there were two plans in place, and one of them was that Danny was apparently sort of thinking about leaving the game at that point. How much of a factor was that going into tribal council? And was, from your point of view, was the plan for that tribal council for Danny to end up going home?
Yeah, look, going into that tribal, I had faith in Kara, and Kara's alliance with us and allegiance with us, the fact that she got voted out of the Brains tribe and ended up over with us, was a really telling factor in us making alliance with her and George. It was quite a vector that helped us make that tough decision as to who to go with at that point. But going into that first tribal there, when Danny went home, Danny had said the day before we actually had tribe swap, he sort of said that, look, I've done and achieved what I wanted to achieve out here. He said, if I don't end up with Chelsea and if I have to leave Brawn camp, I'm not sure if I will want to stay here anymore. And of course, we had tribe swap, and both of those things happened to Danny. We ended up at Brains camp, and Chelsea ended up being left behind, which was Chelsea and Danny were really close, and they were sort of each other's safety net, as was Flick to me or Kara to George. And going into that first tribal, we'd made this plan because Danny had actually pulled all of us aside, as in my alliance of myself, Flick, myself, Kez, Emmett, and said, look, I want to leave. I've tried to leave. I'm going to try and talk to producers. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to leave. I don't care if I'm going to walk out of this river myself. And we talked about it, and we're like, we don't know what's going to happen, when, if they're going to let him go home, if it'll be before tribal, if it'll be after tribal. No idea. No idea at all. So we sat down, myself, Emmett, George, and Kez, and we talked about it and decided that we had to make a plan, and then we had to make a backup plan depending on whether Danny was there for tribal or whether he wasn't. And the plan, if he was there, of course, was to split the vote and play the safe vote, split them both ways. When it was a three-way tie, if it was a three-way tie, if they had split their votes, someone would have gone home straight away, of course, whoever we wanted to. But if not, it was a split vote, then we could pile the votes on whoever we wanted at that point, namely being, I think we were going to vote for Georgia at that point.
Yep.
And then if Danny had gone home, where we were going to be short at least one number, we were going to pile all the votes, bar one, onto Laura. And by piling them on there, we had enough. We had 4 on Laura, which would have gave us enough that we could have one spare and still have a safety net there if someone else flipped over on theirs, and they only voted 3-2. So, or they played idle, of course. But yeah, Cara somehow got mixed up that she was going to vote for Laura, which it was just really, it took us by surprise, myself and Emmett. It really took us by surprise that someone could get that wrong, right? We're like, this is pretty straightforward. That if Danny's there, you're voting for Georgia. If Danny's not there, you're voting for Laura. Like,
yeah.
I'm not sure how much simpler we could have made it in that moment. But yeah, Danny went home, and as we seen a little bit of it, that it was sort of changed up a little bit. Danny was actually really happy to go home when he did and got voted out. He stood up, and if you look at the footage, you'll see he had a massive smile, and he was really happy, and he's like, "See you guys," and he was really happy in that moment, and he thought that one of us had done it. He thought that one of us had granted his wish of going home. And yeah, it was just funny that it all happened that way, but it literally could have been any of us, whoever those 3 girls put on. It could have been us going home. It could have been me. It could have been Emmett. And that proves how much of a factor luck is in this game. Like, it is so much. And I wrote my whole post, part of it yesterday, and my whole post tonight on Instagram and Facebook is about luck and how much luck there is in the game, and just how much percentage that luck plays in where you get. Not so much the big, what people see as luck in the game, as in the twists. I think there's way too much weight placed on those twists in the fans and the public eyes as to how much influence they have. I think they have a lot less influence on outcomes than alliances, mistakes, and premature exodus like either Danny or Chelsea. Like Chelsea's was a massive, massive factor in the outcome of the game. If Chelsea had gone home, I think it could have turned out very, very differently. We were still on level pegging then, and once Chelsea went home, we were just scrambling for whatever plan we could, and I racked my brain for a day and a half about what we were going to do, because the numbers were down, and that's why we ended up trying to vote Danny and trying to convince the other guys to vote Emmett, in the hope that we could play an idol and save Emmett and vote Danny. And we were hoping that George would still vote with us because we were voting for a Brawn in Danny. It just made it so hard at that point. And it's those unseen twists and that unseen luck that I think has a lot more weight in this game than some of the stuff that you do see.
Yeah, and you're right. Luck is obviously a massive factor in the game, because there's 24 individuals playing a game in Survivor, and it seemed that on that Brain Tribe after the swap, you really were unified, that 5-person alliance being the Brawn alliance in that sense. Emmett deciding to begin to throw challenges. Did that sit well to you? With you obviously as a competitor who does a lot of wood chopping competitions, were you really on board with that plan to throw the challenges and get rid of the brains, or how did you feel about that plan?
So it's kind of funny how that all came out and how it was edited and stuff. We had talked about a lot of the talk that came out. It's funny that in the edit, stuff that happens isn't necessarily in chronological order of how it happens on the edit. It's really, really good editing and production skills. That we had actually talked about throwing a challenge prior. Two challenges was when we started talking about whether we needed to throw it. And the reason to throw the challenge was not to get rid of brains as such. There was a couple of really telling factors that came into play there. That the one reason was that we had extra numbers that we could get rid of to keep Brawn strong. We had 3 brains in Rachel, Georgia, Allura that we could use over there to get their numbers down going into merge, of course. But at the same time, we had Flick, who was my closest ally in the game, stuck over on Brawn Tribe in a minority because it was Simon, Denny, and Chelsea, the other half of that massive division against Flick. So it was 3 against 1. And I knew that Simon would be gunning from Flick right from the start. So in throwing a challenge, not only were we going to, if we had to throw a challenge, not only were we going to expend a brains from ours, but we were also saving Flick from a vote. And that was the biggest factor on my thoughts going into that. And I actually spent 6 days straight at Brains Camp looking for an idol. And I had George helping me at some points, Cara helping me, Emmett helping me, and Kez helping me at different points. And I grid searched the whole of Brains Camp twice looking for an idol. And I just searched high and low. I'd be up at daylight and I wouldn't stop until it was dark and trying to find an idol so I could give it to Flick so that we could then win a challenge and she could play it for herself, hopefully send Simon home. Because there was so many big plans in play that we never seen on the edit, and so much more happening. And that's why I now have a newfound bitten tongue to commenting on any other previous seasons, because I know just how much went on behind the scenes and how many other plans there were and how many more factors came into all them votes than what we see. And I really do not want to comment much on any of them others now that I know how much we don't see.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you mentioned there with the Flick idol plan to hand that over, that actually reminds me a little bit of Survivor Heroes versus Villains when JT gave the idol to Russell. Obviously, that didn't work out too well for him, but it would have been a great plan, obviously, and come off well. What was your plan to hand it over? Obviously, at a challenge, I suppose.
Yeah. The plan was to hand it over in a challenge, and it was really funny because I was racking my brain so hard as to why I couldn't find an idol, because as I said, I searched high and low for hours on end. And of course, it came to light after Simon went home, because Flick actually said to me we would go into each challenge and sort of after the challenge, we'd run up when everyone's congratulating each other and we'd hug and we'd whisper as fast as we could into each other's ear, because we only had a few seconds to be able to talk before you get split up and sent back to your camps. And we would download so much information from each other in those few seconds as to exactly what was going on at the other tribe to know what to do. And that's why the talk of throwing challenges even came up, was because I said that, look, Flick's in trouble over there for the first couple of challenges. And I was trying to find that idol, and I'd said to him, I said, look, I'm trying to find an idol, see what you can do, try and find a crack. Until that time, we're going to just roll into these challenges, don't hold back, try and win them, and just stay away from tribal for now because we have numbers. And of course, I couldn't find idol because Simon had 2 and Haley had 1. There was already 3 in play, and that's why I couldn't find one, because there certainly wasn't going to be a 4th one in play. No wonder I couldn't find one. But in that moment, we got to the 3rd immunity challenge. We'd lost 2 in a row, well, 3 in a row, of course, and we got to the last one, which was where we had to stack all the balls on the rising bits of pipe. And Flick had said to me at the challenge prior, after we'd lost, she said, I think I'm in a safe spot. Don't hold back. And I said, rightio, I've been looking for 6 days for this idol. And she said, right. And I said to Emmett and that, I'm like, well, we're going to this one and we're going to win. That's all we're doing. We're not holding back in any way, shape, or form. And we went there, and that challenge went for, I think it was like an hour and 45 minutes or something before that went in. And there were so many more factors than what we've seen on the edit again in that challenge. And I think a lot of people picked up on it, that it wasn't all as seems. But we actually really tried to win that, and we were really ecstatic to win that because we all put our best foot forward. George hates balance beams. That's his one pet hate, is balance beams. And Cara as well hates balance beams and balance. And I think everyone stepped up to the plate that day, and we all knuckled down. And there was multiple temptations put up to throw the challenge in that last challenge, and we didn't even consider it at all. No one on the tribe considered it. We were all just knuckled down and trying to win. I think the photos and stuff of after we did win that really showed that there was a really big sense of jubilation when we did win that challenge. And of course, it all worked out right. The Flick had the numbers right. And of course, I told and convinced George and Cara to vote for Simon anyway after 10 or 11 days on Brain's tribe, and they went there and voted for Simon as well. And it sort of all worked out for the best.
Yeah, that's right. It did work out all for the best. Obviously, Flick was saved and Simon went home, and you went in with the majority, headed into the merge, having George and Cara on your side. Obviously, it came to be that there was a mole in the ranks. I suppose this is a two-part question here. First of all, were you aware that there might have been a leak in the tribe, being George, seeing that Hayley played her idol for Laura? And the second question was, when Kez gave her idol to Flick, did Flick tell you after Tribal Council that she had been given the idol?
Yeah, so from very, very soon after Hayley played that first idol, I knew that there had to be a mole somewhere, because that doesn't just happen by accident, especially after coming and ahhing that she did, which was some really good acting. And then all of a sudden there was a really definite answer. It wasn't I think I might play it for Laura. No, it was I don't know who to play it for. I'm going to play it for Laura. It was those small little subtle hints. And I went back and I racked my brain, and I knew that it certainly wasn't going to be Cara. It certainly wasn't going to be Emmett and Kez, rather. And I knew that I wasn't. So that only left two people on our alliance that it could be. That it sort of all went from there, and we started putting the pieces together. And then from when Kez went home, it was just blindingly apparent from then on who it was. Once we got back to camp, it was so blindingly apparent that it was George to us. But the problem was we didn't have anywhere to go. We didn't have numbers to be able to drop George and Cara straight away, because if we had, it would have put us in a massive minority, and we were going to get chopped, of course, by Hayley and the rest of the Brains tribe, because they had the numbers and they were staying strong as well, as you do at that point in the game. And when they were staying strong in that moment, that was when we decided that we had to get rid of Hayley and Baden. Well, it was Hayley or Baden was the choices. And then, of course, Danny won individual, and she voted Baden. And then, of course, the next one was Hayley. And we decided, as I said, 4 days or 3 days prior, that we were going to vote Hayley. And everyone voted Hayley unanimously. And it wasn't so much voting Hayley to vote Hayley to go home. I had a fair inkling that at some point in the very near future, there had to be a redemption or some description, especially once Chelsea went out of the game, because the numbers just didn't stack up. There had to be some option, someone to stay somewhere, somehow. And I figured if we could get Hayley voted out unanimously, hopefully it'll burn enough bridges that if and when she gets back into the game, she might come and work with us. Some of her tribe mightn't want to work with her. We might be able to make that little decision there. Because, well, as we've seen, she tried to get me and Flick to go and work with her over there.
Yeah.
But again, that would have been a really silly move for us at that point. And in that cut scene, you'll see that I was standing there and didn't sort of say much. I just stood and listened, and Flick replied. And that was my tactic through the game, was that I didn't want to lie. That was not that I don't want to lie. It's that I didn't want to lie for my character in the game. That was what I was setting out to do, was to go through the game and to not lie, to play the most truthful game of Survivor that's ever been played by not telling lies. And so I would sit there and not say anything and just agree and listen. And then we go away. And after that small chat, I went back with Flick and we sat and we talked for nearly half an hour about that. And I said, I laid down all the options of what could happen. And I said, look, going into this tribal, I said, if we flip and go with Hayley, I think that we're going to be in a really, really bad spot, because they're not going to vote with us. They're telling us to vote one way. There's no way the majority votes are going to go there. They want us to vote a certain way to show our allegiance. And when we do that, then they'll consider working with us next time. But by showing our allegiance, we've just burned all our bridges on our side. So it just leaves us completely out in the open. And it was a really smart move on her behalf, if I'd been gullible enough to take it.
Yeah.
But, of course, I didn't. But then with Chelsea going home, it left us in that much of a minority that we had no more options. And we had to start somewhere else or looking at ourselves to vote out ourselves. And that's why we looked at Danny as well. Danny was sort of Chelsea's closest ally at this point, and Danny took it really hard that Chelsea had gone home. Well, we all did, but Danny more than most, because they were so close. And I think it was affecting Danny's judgment in the game at that point, in that moment, and that was sort of another telling factor as to why we voted that way. But
of course, so obviously it worked against you in the end, Hayley returning from Redemption Rock, as much as you anticipated that. George obviously flipped back over to the other side, and you became the scapegoat there, I suppose, and were voted out in a 5-4-0 vote. Did you have any inkling that the Brains tribe might have been targeting you?
So there was some off-camera stuff. Oh, wait on hold. I'll just circle back for 2 secs to your previous question about and Kez got voted out about the idol. So I knew the moment that it happened. I seen it happen. Flick looked at me and then looked at Kez, hugged, and I was there right behind Flick, ready to give Kez a hug when she handed it over. And then we went back to camp. We went and we were laying in the shelter as soon as we got back, and Flick goes, I've got the idol. We need to keep it on the DL. I don't know who else has seen. And we talked about me and Flick were so close in that game. And we were inseparable, and we told each other everything. From day 2, we had said to each other that we're going to take each other to the end no matter what. And it was do or die. It was our ride together. And we did that in every aspect. And as Flick said, she said, it's not my idol, it's our idol. And we will discuss all the way through what we're going to do with it. And if you want to play it, if we need to play it for you, we'll play it for you. If we need to play it for me, we can play it for me. Let me know what we think we should do, and I'll hold on to it. And, of course, that's what we did. And it did work against me in the end. And me trying to look after our alliance and tribe was what got me in the end when we voted for Danny. And we sat out the waterhole and discussed who we were going to vote for and try and play the idol for Emmett. And when everyone left, right before we went to tribal, everyone else left the waterhole, and it was just me and Flick left sitting out there, and we sat on a rock just above the water. And Flick asked me, she said, "Do you think that we're doing the right thing?" And I said, "Look, we've stuck by the alliance. We're trying to make the most of the alliance for what is left of it right now." I said, "If we can get through one more vote, it might be time to look at us trying to flip to Brains and going with Haley in that vote, because we're going to be shorter and shorter on numbers, and try and target someone that Haley wants to get rid of." And Flick said, "Well, do you think we should play the idol for Emmett?" And I said, "Look, we've said we're going to play it for him. We probably should." And I said, and I turned to her and I looked and I said, "Geez, I don't know, maybe we should play it for me." And she said, "Well, if you think we should play it for you, we'll play it for you." And I armed hard and I looked at her, and we just sort of, for a good 2 or 3 minutes, we sort of just sat there in silence. And she said, "Well, tell me what to do." And I said, "Well, we need to just do what we said and stick by our morals, because we're both playing really truthful games, and hope that the numbers fall in our favour. It's Lady Luck tonight, and hopefully George votes for Danny, because Danny's still a Brawn, no matter what." And yeah, here I was sitting on jury the next night.
How much? What was your plan going forward in the game? Obviously, had things paved out the right way, and George had voted with you, or you had played Flick's idol on yourself. What was your plan going forward to the end game? Obviously, I'm assuming you would have been very close with Flick. She was probably your final two at that point, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly. Well, again, depending on how the game panned out, because we would have still been in a majority of some description. But I had really good rapport with Haley, and I think Haley certainly would have worked with me if I gave that opportunity. And she said that since that she certainly did want to work with me, and we had very similar trains of thought and very similar thought processes out there. And I think we would have worked really well together, and that's what I was sort of looking at. And that she wanted to get rid of some of the strong threats like Emmett and whatnot. And Emmett was that strong physical threat at that point, but I mean, he was still one of my alliance. He was kind of like Benny. That I needed him for at least one more vote, because we needed the numbers, and he was a certain number. He was there, and I had a lot of faith in Emmett at that point of the game. But moving forward, I would have liked to have tried and made an alliance with some of those stronger players in Haley, and maybe even Laura or Way in the game. But it was funny that that I ended up on the chopping block that night, because I had multiple people tell me that Flick, and after the game even, that Flick was actually the person that was supposed to cop the votes that night. And it was actually the game, well, the immunity challenge prior, that sort of flipped everyone's votes on Brains, that they were all going to vote for Flick, no matter the outcome, as long as she didn't win immunity. But then, as we see in that immunity challenge, when Flick got robbed of that win for simply lifting her hand off her head to there, then everyone sort of thought that, nah, we shouldn't vote for Flick. She's been hard done by already once today. Who else is it? And as we knew, Emmett was going to get the idol played on him, as George had told them, and that Gerald.
As you say, Lady Luck in the game, and things just change on a dime, just like that. Your relationship with Haley, obviously, you guys didn't vote together at any point in the game, but you said you were obviously looking to work with her going forward. What was your thought process at the final tribal council between Haley and George there? Were you really gung-ho on Haley, or did George have any convincing that he could have done to potentially swing your vote toward him?
Yeah, look, going into final tribal, and I've said this before, and I said it in final tribal. I actually said at the start of my question, but it got cut. So in Survivor for me is a game of numbers, right? And I quite like my mathematics and numbers, and I tend to resort to that in any decision making anywhere to try and make a correct decision. I put it to the numbers. The numbers generally don't lie to me unless I've missed something, and then numbers can lie very badly. But in Survivor, I believe that Survivor is 25% physical, 25% strategic, and 50% mental. That's the percentage layout for me. How you define each of those is completely subjective. But I think that that's the breakdown of the percentages of Survivor. I don't think that physical is necessarily winning challenges. I think that it's more what you try and do and the you put into it and what you're aiming to do than the actual outcome. And the same with the strategic. I think it's you don't have to be the best or the most strategic out there. You just have to be in the right place at the right time, because again, probably 50% of strategic is luck. You have to be in the right place at the right time to be able to achieve any of those. And if one small thing changes, that strategy is straight out the window. So it's that, but I think that social being 50%, and that's the one I put the most weight on at all times, is because that social is the one that is less subjective in this game. Numbers tell in Survivor, and at the end of the game, Final Trouble being a perfect example. If you don't have the social side, no one's going to vote for you, and you can't win Survivor. End of story. If you've driven everyone that far away from you, you're never going to win. End of story. But look, I think that going in, that Hayley had certainly played a really good all-round game, and she was weighted reasonably heavily in all of the categories. George had certainly played probably the best strategic game out there. But again, strategy to me is about 25% of the total, the voting weight. Again, in the edit, you see a lot more strategy than what you do of the others. You probably only see 10% of the social, but you see 60 or 70% of the strategy that happens in the game. And I think that George getting those extra points there just wasn't quite enough to make up for the stuff that he lacked a bit of in the others. And to make a rational decision rather than an emotional one, I think you've got to be able to put it on paper and say why someone should win more than someone else. And again, my numbers and my rationale mightn't be the same as the next person's and the weight that I put on it. But also, a vote for Hayley wasn't a vote against George for me. I think George had an exceptional game, and it was awesome to see someone be able to get to that point in the game without even trying in some of those challenges was unbelievable. And to be in a minority position and survive through that first little bit of the game was a really good achievement. But I also think that some of the strategy that George was credited for, Hayley should have been credited for just as much, because a lot of the moves that George made, if you read deeper into them, Hayley was also the linchpin in that. The George was simply handing a little piece of information to Hayley, but Hayley was the one that had used all the social game to get those tribe members to vote together, because in Survivor, as I've said before, social is such a big part that if you don't have the numbers in the social game to be able to pull people together, it doesn't matter, because you're not going to get enough votes, whether it's at tribal, at normal tribal, or at final tribal. You're not going to be able to get the votes if you can't get the people behind you to start with. And I think without Haley pulling that alliance together over on Brains, a lot of those moves of George's never would have came to fruition.
Now, if Flick had made the final three there, whether that be against Haley or George, would you have voted for one of the Brains in that instance, or would you have stuck with Flick? And had you been at Final Tribal Council, what would be your approach to the Final Tribal Council? What jury question or statement would you make there if Flick was at the end?
Look, I think that my question, so it was sort of a little bit taken not exactly in the context that I wanted it to be taken in. And I said to Haley after the game, only in the last few weeks, actually after Final Tribal aired, and I said the same thing to George as well. I had conversations with both of them. So my question in Final Tribal was, if the game was to restart right now with the members of the jury that are sitting here plus you guys, who would work with you right now? Who could you form an alliance with?
Yeah.
And why? And the answers they gave were very sort of ultimate answers. They were just, George said, no one. And Haley said, everyone. How I had structured the question was that I wanted each of them to be able to go to each member of the jury and go along and say, Gerald will work with me. Why would Gerald work with me? Because I had a great alliance with him, because I had great connection with him, blah, blah, blah. And then that gave me an opportunity to say, well, no, actually you didn't. No, you did this, this, and this. But that gave them then a platform and a chance to rebut what I said, and a chance to address any grievances of any description with each and every member of the jury one at a time. And that's the platform I wanted to give them. I wanted to give both of them a chance to right any wrongs that they might have had or strengthen any ties that they might have had there. That was the platform I was aiming to give them, and neither of them saw that or took that opportunity, which was really disappointing to me in that moment. That I was really, I'd spent 4 or 5 days, I think, well, nearly that much, trying to think and structure a question which would give them an opportunity for the most air time, the most play time, and to be able to have the most weight possible. And I think that was where George particularly fell short, was that he had that platform right there to be able to address each and every member of the jury and right any of those wrongs or grievances that were there in that moment. And for a lot of the jury members, again, I hate speaking for other people, but for a lot of the jury members, it was only very, very small things that stopped them voting for George over Haley. It wasn't, and a lot of the fans looked at the edit and thought that we were all salty, quote unquote. But I don't think a lot of people were salty. That wasn't so much the vibe. The vibe was that we wanted everyone to be able to own up to everything in the game. We had, particularly at Brawn Tribe, the mantra that whatever happened in the game, there was a time to be strategic and to do that scrap talk, and the rest of the time was social time to get to know people, to build social bonds, etc., rather than all of it all the time. And that was really telling at Tribal, that everyone saw the big moves for what they were. And everyone knew that. And the big lies for what they were. And they knew that. They credited that to George. And when we all did, that was an awesome move in the game, each of those big lies and big moves. They weren't the things that had the most weight in the decisions. And that's what I've been saying this whole time, that the stuff that has the most weight is the stuff that we don't necessarily see on the edit, the small things. And I believe for the jury, well, for most of the jury members that I've talked to about this, the stuff that weighted on it the most was the small lies and stuff like that, stuff that was insignificant in that moment. A perfect example for George was actually when Flick asked her question, which we didn't actually get to see on the edit. She asked a question similar to mine, shorter-winded but similar. And then it was exactly that, about those insignificant questions. And she said, George, in the game, you used a lot of these small lies that didn't need to happen. Why did you do that? And again, it wasn't nitpicking on anyone. It was simply wanting, I guess, right in that moment, a sense of owning up to everything you've done. As we do at Final Tribal, it's a chance to lay everything on the table with no judgment, I guess, either way. It's that opportunity to put everything there, and you're not in the game, you're not going to get voted out for it. But by putting everything on the table, you let everyone see it, and I think that's a good thing, especially in our game, that you've got to be able to read the room. And what she asked George in that moment was that what she asked George in that moment was about a little thing that he'd said only the day before about taking her to Final 2. And it was insignificant. It didn't matter either way, because whoever won made the decision. It did not matter. You didn't have a vote. You didn't have anything. And George said to Flick that I will take you to Final 2. And that was all that Flick said to George in that moment. And George, instead of saying something along the lines of, yeah, I did that, it was a lie in that moment, whatever, George said, no, I didn't. And Flick's like, yes, you did. It was yesterday. I'm not remembering this wrong. It was yesterday. And it was stuff like that. And there was more than one instance of this little stuff. And again, I don't know whether George was sort of denying it in that moment, or whether he didn't remember it because it was such an insignificant thing. But everyone has different opinions on what's significant and insignificant. It's so subjective. And I think that's a perfect example of that, of what something that you think is completely insignificant to you can be really significant to someone else. And you have to be conscious of that and be able to read the room. And that happened a lot. And I believe that was what had the most weight on a lot of people's votes against, or for Hayley instead of George. It wasn't so much a vote against George, but as a vote for Hayley because of, if you get what I mean. It was a close race that both of them played.
All about transparency.
Exactly. In that moment, that's your moment to be totally transparent. And if it was a game of all-stars or something, I think it would have been a different vibe, where just helter-skelter, hell for leather, go do whatever strategies and deep-seated lying that you want to do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But in that moment, especially on Brawn Tribe, a lot of emphasis was placed on tribe strong, be transparent, be loyal to your word. And we respected that. And I think that's about reading the room. Again, like, that's not necessarily what Survivor is about, is it? It's not about loyalty or anything, but it's about reading the room. What Survivor's about is people skills and being able to read people and being able to adapt to every one of those situations that's presented to you in whatever way it's presented, whether it's what you think Survivor should be or not. If you want to win, you need to adapt and read the room.
So for that reason, do you think that Flick would have still held your vote at Final Tribal Council had she gone against someone like George or Hayley?
Look, I think it would have been really, really close. If like between the three of them, I think it was really close. Flick, again, I think had the best social game out of the three of them. she was in really good, like myself, was in really good with all of them, and anyone would work with her at any point in the game if she asked, basically, except for when the numbers were really down at the end when it was just her and Danny trying to work with Hayley, and it wasn't a smart move for Hayley to work with her. And I think that, again, being my weighted maths mind trying to find a winner and putting 50% emphasis on social, I think that if we say that Flick had a 45% social game and Hayley had a 30, that Hayley had even if we say she had a perfect physical game at 25%, that Flick was not far behind. Flick absolutely knuckled down in every single one of them challenges and tried to the very end. So I think her physical game was probably at 20%, which left her strategic, which might have been 5 or 10% less than both of the others, but that puts them still nearly on equal ground.
Yeah, very close. Yeah,
that was my train of thought going into all of it, and it was those small things that made the difference for each of them.
Yeah, and I like that strategy going into the actual vote, and as you say, counting up the different aspects of the game and tailoring your vote to what matters most in the game to you. Now, Gerald, I'll give you the opportunity, given you weren't on the screen too much. Were there any scenes, any fun little moments throughout that didn't make the air that you'd potentially like to talk about, whether that's in the game or at Jury Villa?
Oh, there was so many amazing and funny moments and really emotional moments that didn't make the edit. That I would sit there with bated breath waiting for each episode to see, and we didn't get to see any of them. One really funny moment when we were at Brawn Tribe was actually when Simon managed to in no less words crap his pants.
Yep.
That was a pretty big moment. That was a good laugh by a lot of people, and there was a lot of dumbfounded looks and gobsmacked faces there. But there was a lot of really emotional times. Like, we spent so many nights sitting around the fire and discussing family stuff and life and whatnot. Like, the day that we got the photos, and only day 6 on Brawn Tribe, was just such an amazing, magical moment between all of us that were there and getting to know each other. And we sat there for probably close to 3 hours telling family stories, and then there were so many tears shed and stuff. And we didn't get to see anywhere near the extent of what actually happened, of all that sort of stuff throughout the game. But it was just a really interesting experience to see how much actually happens that we don't see. That's what I said. It's gave me a newfound appreciation.
There's 48 days crammed into essentially 24 one-hour episodes.
That's exactly right. We saw such a tiny, tiny snippet of what happened out there. And of all the moments, if I had gone before the actual season came out and listed off my top 30 moments that I thought that happened there, that I thought would make air, that I thought were the most awe-inspiring, audience-holding moments that happened during the game. Out of that 30, I think we probably might have seen one.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so many things, and so many things that, to me, again, everything's subjective, but to me were some of the most influential parts of the game. And it was really interesting how some of that was portrayed. I think one of those things that wasn't portrayed that I thought was a really influential part, and that I was, I guess, a little bit disappointed that we didn't see, was back at Brawn Tribe from day 2, the alliance between myself, Shannon, Flick, and Kez. We were rock solid from day 2, and we spent nearly every waking hour together non-stop, and that's what everyone, all the other girls said. I'm not sure just quite how they found enough footage to put it together without you in anything or without you talking, because all you ever do is talk to be able to put that together. But there was so many of those special moments. There was another really good moment back at a Brawn tribe where we were laying there in the shelter, and there was actually a launch by the Elon Musk space project, and there was a whole string of the cluster satellites going up, and so we were all sitting there, laying there talking about whatever garbage we were talking about at the time, and Simon was standing outside the shelter and looking up, and all of a sudden Simon was screaming like a girl. It was it was quite overwhelming. And he thought it was extraterrestrial activity, and he's like, I've never seen anything like this in my life. Oh my God. And I'm like, chill out, mate. I know, I know what that is. Like, that's extraterrestrial.
Maybe Elon might be an alien. We don't know.
Well, we don't know exactly. Lizard man, you do not know. Anything can happen these days. But then that segued into me giving a 2 or 3 or 4 hour lecture on space, astrophysics, quantum physics. That was an interesting night.
We should get you on a season with Baden or Sam from the previous Australian Survivor seasons. I'm sure you guys have a great chat about all sorts of astrophysics and space stuff.
Exactly right. And it was really funny because at that point in the game, we didn't know the Brains tribe at all. We had no idea who they were, what they did, nothing at all. And we thought for sure like they're all professors and like they're all in, who knows, like IT, they could be in aeronautics, they could be in microbiology, who knows, anything of the above. And after that chat for the night, I at one point I got into the Schrodinger's cat theory, etc. And Flick was sort of, I guess, quite taken aback at that theory, and it was just bending her mind. Like, Flick's very
on the wrong tribe.
Like Flick is amazing. I love that girl, but oh my God, she is so blonde sometimes. It's gold, and she knows it. She knows it so much. And it was just blowing her mind, the Schrodinger cat theory, and the whole quantum entanglement conundrum. And we're laying there, and she's like, tomorrow, if we win immunity, can I say that? Can I go up and get the immunity island and say that? And I'm like, it's not going to make sense, but sure. And she's like, oh, I'm so going to do it. And we won the immunity challenge the next day, and there's actually a photo of Flick holding the immunity idol up above her head. And in that moment, she looked at the Brains tribe, held the idol up, and just said, quantum entanglement! And the whole lot of the Brains tribe just stood there and they're like, what? The fuck is she on about? Oh, pardon language.
It's fine.
Absolute hysterics, and we were just wetting ourselves laughing. It was priceless. Absolutely.
The things we don't see on the show, if you got the opportunity, if Endemol Shine called you right now, would you want to go back and play another time?
Oh, I would go back in a heartbeat. If I got that phone call right now, I would be back there before this segue ended into the final bit that we're going to have on this video. I would be in the car.
Bag's already packed?
The bag is always packed in case of that phone call.
And you've got another Recupera, I take it, to take out there if you get the call?
There is quite a collection of Recuperas.
Very nice, very nice.
Brain elements. I cop so much flack about my outfit choice going out there, but
no RM Williams though, was there?
No, Thomas Cook, mate, all the way.
There you go. Well, yeah, RM Williams is South Australian. You were in the home element as well. We haven't discussed this. What's the big advantage being Cloncurry and regional Queensland? I believe you're on the Sunshine Coast. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm at Kilcoy, so inland, about just over an hour off the coast. But I do think that being in Cloncurry in Queensland in general, especially outback Queensland, certainly gave me a bit of an advantage, I guess. The background knowledge and stuff, I think, really gave me a leg up and a sense of comfort, or a sense of a sense of that you knew what was there, rather than being scared, everything being foreign. Because Survivor is such a foreign thing to everyone in every aspect. You're put in an environment or a place that you have no idea about, with 24 people you have no idea about, doing a game that you have no idea about, basically, because you're stepping in with these ridiculously daunting challenges for 48 days. Like, it's just so beyond comprehension. It's not funny. So if I could take away one of those points that were going to be holding me back or detrimental to me, i.e. feeling comfortable in the environment that I'm put in, I think it was a real win in my books. And I did. I felt really good out there, and I slept really well, and I just felt at ease, whereas people like Datey and stuff he was so scared of snakes and stuff all the time, all day. The crocs are going to come and get him, and the snakes are going to bite him, and spiders everywhere. And it didn't sort of worry or faze me too much. But I don't think I would have been quite as comfortable if we had been on a beach. Put it that way.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And it was great seeing you on the show, obviously. And I do wish, having spoken to you about all those moments that didn't make the show, we got to see more of you. And hopefully, if you do come back, you don't get a purple head in the future. So fingers crossed, you come back in the future, and we get to see you again. Any social media or any projects you're working on at the moment you like to plug?
So at the minute, I've just been trying to keep my own social media rolling. I've got a few bits and pieces coming with some merch and stuff, some Gerald the Woodchopper merch and stuff. But I've been just trying to help a few little organisations out and trying to get behind the show movement and keep it going. Again, they've been plagued by so much and so many setbacks over the last 2 years because of COVID. It's just been ridiculous, and there's so many struggling show societies that literally all these show societies do is try and help their communities and put agriculture and community at the forefront of every town for no one's benefit except the community. And the amazing work that they do in education and in trying to promote all this stuff, and to try and get kids out there and push them into stuff beyond their comfort zone and give them a leg up into all these different facets, whether it's horse riding or whether it's wood chopping or whether it's public speaking through the rural ambassador or showgirl programs, any of the above. They do some amazing work, and I just really hope that I can get behind and show some support to these local organisations that are all around Australia and internationally as well, and hopefully we can get them all up and going very shortly and get them back out there. And that also gives me the opportunity, which I'm so thankful for, to be able to travel around our amazing country and also to connect with the fans of Survivor, which has been awesome. I've had 3 shows in the last sort of month or so since the season wrapped up. And the fan support's been awesome. I've had fans come to each one of them at different points and want to get photos and talk about the game and stuff. And it's just awesome to be able to connect with fans in so many different locations and to be able to do that around the place while competing and living out my Survivor dream. What more can I ask for, really?
Yeah, and that's the beauty about it. Obviously, you put yourself out there, and now, as you say, you're a minor celebrity at this point, going all around the country. And hopefully, if you're ever in Sydney, Newcastle, Central Coast, wherever you are, hopefully we can catch up and say good day. And best of luck to you. Hopefully, the Acker and the Royalist show and all the other shows come back once we get out of this COVID situation. Gerald, it's been so great talking to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time today and discussing everything about the show. It really is appreciated. We'll drop Gerald's Instagram in the description down below if you want to give him a follow there. If you haven't already, guys, please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. We should have more Australian Survivor interviews coming up, and also plenty of Survivor 41 content going on as well right here on Reality Pop. We really appreciate your time for watching, and we appreciate you, Gerald, for coming onto the show. Thank you so much, guys. Good night.
My absolute pleasure, guys. You have a great night, and thanks again to Reality Pop for giving me this opportunity to come on here and connect with you guys.
Thank you, Gerald.